Hello, I'm Rob Price. This season, we're exploring agentic AI from the perspectives of those driving its evolution. Welcome to Futurise.
Hi, I'm Mae Lamentillo. I'm from the Ethno-Linguistic Group. I am the founder of NightOwl AI. We hope to expand the social linguistic function of artificial intelligence to languages that are more marginalized.
And Anime, I mean, we met, I heard you speak. I loved what you were talking about because the principle of inclusion and enabling everybody, no matter where they are or what they speak, to be able to take advantage of some of the innovations that are happening is a fundamental principle from my point of view. How have you found the reaction to what you're doing as you've traveled around the world speaking to people? Um, do people do you find that people have been using large language models, but in the languages that are most common, for example, English, Chinese, whatever else, and are people fascinated about what you're doing and embracing it, or intrigued? How do people react?
I guess there's a mix of reaction, but essentially, a lot of people did not know that this problem exists. Um, there's generally a lot of passion coming from people. Now we have a volunteer network spanning 20 different countries. We started in my dorm room in Oxford, and now we are, um, our volunteer network has grown so long. So just imagine we have about 7,000 languages, but only 35 are completely supported, which means that majority of the languages are not in the digital space. Either they lack the support that they need for users to be able to interact with it, or it's completely unheard of in the digital space. So this is something that's relatable for a lot of people. I mean, you can talk to ChatGPT in English, you can talk to it in Mandarin, but you start talking to it in other languages like Karaya, and the fluency, for example, declines by a very large bit, if not completely inexistent. So, for example, the latest disclosure of ChatGPT claims to speak about 180 languages, but 180 languages to 7 million is less than 1% in reality.
I, I mean, I think I remember going to Norway a couple of years ago, and ChatGPT was just launched, and I ended up having a conversation with ChatGPT about the Norwegian language, and it told me that the best way to replicate its capability for a language that had 5 million speakers was to feed it an equivalent amount of documents than that had been fed to it in English. Well, that's clearly impossible because there just isn't that volume. So how do you even go about creating a language model for languages that just haven't got volumes of written content, indeed haven't got written content in some cases?
That is why we're trying to develop a framework. So it's one of the work that we're doing, but it's still ongoing. We are fascinated now with open, large, big AI, but not all communities need large, big AI systems. Sometimes we need small systems to be able to create an AI system that is more accessible for everyone. Because you are right, there is not a lot of academic literature written in the Norwegian language, for example, that can be comparable to, say, English or Mandarin. So if we follow the same metric, meaning we agree to the idea that it would require trillion parameters in order to build one AI system, then most countries would not be able to afford it and would not be able to sustain it. and would not even be able to create it in the first place. So what we're trying to promote, um, so initially Night Owl AI started as a language preservation tool because we believe that once you're able to train an AI system into a language, then it will be able to teach it to the next generation. But the next step is to creating an NLP framework that requires less data, that is much more simple and close, but that people are able to hold its own data into the system.
It's one of there's almost an irony, isn't there, in the sense that we've seen AI be used to rediscover lost languages or to translate things that have been people have found struggling in terms of old tablets or whatever that might be. And yet, obviously, there is this logical threat of the current set of large language models to the diversity of language, which is what I love in terms of that you talk about there. It is about, yes, it's about preservation, but it's equally enabling people to engage using those technologies. One of the common patterns that we find in the work that we do is um, preservation of expertise in the workplace. So where you've got people with deep expertise over many decades about to retire, then how do you actually preserve that knowledge and know-how for future generations? It's almost a kind of variant of that, isn't it? It's capturing that somehow. But I'm very conscious to your point of the thousands of languages that exist that you how I'm intrigued to know a bit more about how you've gone about it. You mentioned a volunteer network, but logically you'd need thousands of volunteers, wouldn't you, to engage? What's your ambition? What are you hoping to be able to preserve, and how do you scale that out to kind of have a bigger impact?
Um, just to touch on your points, um, because when we look at the fairness frameworks that are currently available in the market, they look about fairness, they look about gender, they look about ethnicity, but they do not look at language parity. In fact, most fairness frameworks are either monolingual, bilingual, and I think that the largest set that I've seen is the one that's created by Facebook. It's called Flores 200, which looks at 200 different languages. But again, 200 languages is only a very small percentage of the overall languages that exist. So, what we're trying to do is one, create a momentum so that people would demand a more linguistically diverse um, AI systems. Second, it's AI sovereignty and it's data sovereignty. We want to be able to ensure that people who own their data do not feel that they have to surrender their data just to be part of the AI ecosystem, and that there might be a solution for it. Our goal is to create an NLP framework that is much more sustainable for smaller communities like mine. I feel like what you see in Norway is what I see in my own community. A lot of languages are endangered. 40% of the languages in the Philippines are endangered. But I talk to people from Nigeria and they're encountering the same thing. You go to Colombia and they're faced with the same problem. Why? Because there is no uh, enough livelihood that pushes this language into existence. A lot of the younger generation are forced to adopt languages that are not their own. In reality, if you look at the English speakers, there are more learned English speakers like me than those that actually speak English as their first language. And that's where we want to do. This is what my research is all about in Oxford also. We want to encounter where is the risk on artificial intelligence emanates and how can we identify them so that we can create value in existing AI systems. So um, I am very fortunate that I am able to work with not just with my, so this is not just my ambition. This is an ambition of a lot of people now. And I think that we are very fortunate that we are able to work at that level.
In a sense, we're talking about the democratization of models, aren't we? Because we're enabling communities, or in a perfect world, we'd enable communities to be able to cultivate models that are right for them and engage with their community and their people to be able to do things in the same way that anyone else in any other kind of community can. As an ambition, I love it. I'm intrigued though. How you mentioned a few times kind of your work at Oxford. What was the background? How did you get into this? What was the inspiration?
Well, I am from the Kraya ethno-linguistic group, which means that I speak one of the more marginalized languages that are considered endangered as we speak. I speak Hiligaynon, and my country is very diverse. Initially, this was a local project, but then I started with LSE. I was part of LSE Generate, and they said that this is a project that can easily be replicated in other countries. So if you're going to go with it, might as well look at other languages that are low resource and also very complex insofar as their morphologies are concerned, and then widen it. But there is a level of difficulty because a lot of um, the academic material, for example, in English, you would just have to transform these materials into a language that the computer is able to understand. But for a lot of marginal languages, you're dealing with oral stories, with oral histories that are not even in written form. So it's a very multi-step process because there is largely this is largely a vetted process because we are reliant on our volunteers' um, data.
I remember having a conversation with Shiko on her work in Kenya, and she talked about street languages, so those that were simply spoken because there wasn't a written record. Now, of course, logically, I mean, we train agents with spoken input, so technically, of course, that can be done with a community. I guess it's just the volume. How do you ever kind of approximate the volume of being able to just throw documents at something?
Correct. But I know that we do have a lot of audio to written apps that exist already. But it's important to know that in our development, we engage with a lot of humans just because that these systems are not yet available for those languages that are considered low resource and with complex morphologies. It's easy to transcribe my speech now as I speak in English, but you will have a very difficult time when you transcribe it in a local language just because the systems that exist doesn't even recognize these languages. So they will guess because AI systems is largely guesswork. They will try to predict what the next word is based on what you're saying. From an audio perspective, but for languages that are not in their system, it's almost completely unrecognizable.
So we've talked about some of the obvious challenges with building models of this type in terms of things like volume and input from people around the world. What are some of the other technical hurdles or things that you're trying to solve that enable you to achieve the ambitions that you've set out?
We talk about digital equity. So a large part of the world doesn't even have access to internet. And now I'm very fortunate to be talking about AI access, what AI can do for you, but for a large part of the world, AI doesn't even exist because they do not have access to it. And I thought to myself, we can debate the pros and cons of artificial intelligence, but if we're going to pursue this from a more equitable perspective, then everyone should have access first. And there are several barriers to it, like do you speak the language, for example, that these AI systems are able to understand? And again, are less developed countries uh, ever able to create their AI sovereign systems? Can they completely say that my AI system is sovereign in as much as a country declares sovereignty? And if they do not have an AI system that is completely sovereign, can a country claim to be entirely sovereign? I mean, we are only seeing the initial phases of AI, and the AI we know now will be completely different to the AI we call 5 years, 10 years from now. And building these capacities is crucial and important just because this is what the future is. It's something that countries and communities could no longer escape. A lot of the jobs have already integrated AI or artificial intelligence in their workforce, in their work systems. How do young people from more developed countries keep up? And this is something that I've always wanted to push. I feel that I'm very lucky to be able to be getting guidance from LSE and then now from in Oxford. But I wish that the system that I'm developing is able to help my own community and the communities that are often forgotten by the AI systems.
which I completely applaud in that sense. I mean, it's in the work that I've done globally around digital responsibility, thinking about the impact that technologies have on society and how do we and even collaborating with people like the UN around how do you actually ensure that everyone thinks about the impact of some of those decisions that we make. I've been fascinated about some of the work that we've done to translate the CDR work into multiple languages. We've done over 30 at this stage. And one of the things that I'm conscious of is that some languages are quite similar, and some languages are utterly distinct. There are backgrounds and evolution of the language. I mean, I don't know. For example, if we just looked at the Philippines in terms of you mentioned it was very diverse, but I assume that there will be some of those languages have got similarities, and some of them may be completely different.
Yeah.
Um, do you find that that complicates the process of creating those models, or or actually is every language kind of sufficiently distinct? It still needs a separate process to create a model that's sufficiently functional.
No, no. I agree with you. There are similarities and there are distinctions, and we try to take advantage. We are not an expert of all languages. That's why we work with experts around the globe whose expertise is this particular languages. We want to be able to create an NLP framework that recognizes linguistic parity as one of its benchmark. And there's also the discussion of where to keep data because a lot of indigenous people are very, very protective about their data. It's not something that they want everyone to have a share of. It's something that is closely knitted into their community. And I respect that. I respect that if you own this particular data, you should have a choice on whether to put it out in the universal system or create a system, a mini system that, that exists for communities.
I think the other thing that I'm very conscious of in the conversation, I have lots of conversations every day around agents and agentic AI and the models that power those agents. And one of the moves that I see in the market is consideration that the answer for models that power agents is not simply the latest large language model that happens to have the most power, but it's small language models or bespoke language models for the task that the agents are doing. Because there's all sorts of positive reasons around that in terms of whether it's sustainability, energy use, whether it's actually refinement of the job that it's doing rather than a generic approach. So, in some ways, I imagine that some of the work you're doing around the framework is relevant to many people in the future, no matter whether their focus is language or actually approaches to build models that are right for them in the context of the work that they're doing.
But to clarify, I always feel that AI is a tool and that it should never come to a point wherein AI can completely decide on certain matters. I always want to ensure that there is a human component into the decision making. And so, for example, I am completely opposed to AI systems that are able to have some level of discretion in so far as specific tasks are concerned, just because from a legalistic and legal framework, who is then accountable if there are mistakes? And I think that that AI systems should be audited as well. Um, that now AI exists not just in education and or universities, but also in military and warfare. And the last thing we want is to have completely autonomous AI systems parading and deciding on their own.
Yeah, no, and completely agree and support that. Strong focus for all our work is transparency, auditability, evidence chain for the things that have been decided, etc. So completely support. So I guess as a final question, lots of different people listening to this conversation, hopefully lots of different people fascinated, whether they are native English speakers or indeed any other language that they might be capable of speaking. If you were going back to your volunteer community, if you'd got a message for anyone who was interested in supporting, interested in helping, getting involved in any way, what would you suggest that they do? How could they contribute in some way that would be helpful for the work that you're doing, Anime?
Um, Well, we'd love to work with you, and we'd love to expand our volunteer network. We've opened a new program called Language Ambassador. So if you're an expert of a specific language, we'd love to have you as part of our Language Ambassador network. Um, and let's try to document these systems. It's very important, this open dictionaries. And I love how open dictionaries are now being co-created in several communities, and how this is the first time that that language actually has a dictionary, and it's made by the people within that community. And this is something that um, we hope to do in the future, and this is an endeavor that we are very, very interested in.
Fantastic. Now, I think I've always felt that my biggest regret in life is that I don't speak any other languages. And I always feel really bad that we have conversations in English, um, simply because, as you said, that seems to be the language that many people around the world are using, that in Chinese. But I think it's only right to say, would you also, Animate, like to kind of finish the podcast with a message in your own language rather than in English, just to bring that to life in the context of this podcast?
Eh, Maraming salamat. Ah, Isang karangalan ang makausap kayo sa podcast na ito. Thank you.
Thank you, Anime. It's been a pleasure.